It's time for Myth of the Week.
All right, so this is a myth that I kind of ran into in my travels, and I was installing a EVSE charger for a customer, and I kind of asked the AHJ, and the AHJ is like, well, I'm going to refer to the manufacturer instructions, whatever that says. And so I went and I realized that since I was installing a Tesla charger, that I would go off the manufacturer instructions, and it basically said that as long as it's hardwired, then GFCI protection is not required. So that's what I did. I went and I hardwired it. Inspector showed up, showed him the manufacturer instructions, showed him that Tesla manufacturer instructions is take a responsibility for that personnel protection. It did say it was complete with personnel protection, and that as long as it's hardwired, GFCI breaker was not to be installed. Now, part of the reason why they do that with this Tesla charger is because they actually have a compatibility issue with Class A devices. So they tell you not to install a Class A device upstream on this EVSE, which the actual charger's inside the vehicle. And so what they have is the manufacturers taking on that responsibility to have those safety devices in place and to make this a safe install. And I don't know if you saw this the same way as me, James, but when that manufacturer instruction says no GFCI protection is required when hardwired, then that means that there's no outlet when it's hardwired, because there's no reason, you're not protecting for anything. You have a utilization at the vehicle, and all that is just a termination to the EVSE.
That would be correct.
That's the way I was looking at it, but like I say, you get guys out there that just have to kind of like push all this like outlet controversy, and all this like 210.8F, and that's the whole thing. It's like, I mean, if you want to push that, that's fine, but like I say, this AHJ that I did this job for, he did not mention a single thing about 210.8F, and just goes to show you that 210.8F's become a quite the large boat anchor of a reference, and it's just going to get worse if they don't either delete it or somehow modify it to make it kind of help them out when it comes to this incompatible equipment in the future.
All right. You want me to take it away?
Yeah, so I know we got audio to support all this. Like I said, we had some audio from... I'm glad that he's finally getting it,
So your AHJ's moron. Well, let me, before I get into this, I want to comment on this. This is the typical mob mentality I'm talking about right here. And I've stated this many times on the groups, and this deals with the guys over at ECD. Okay? So what I'm trying to say here, anybody that disagrees with what they're saying, you're a moron, and trust me, they call you much worse than that. And this guy here, Jeremy, we know who it is, Jeremy Weed, he is like one of the ringleaders. He calls everybody names, him, Ted Fritz, Jeffrey Bauer, all of them. If you disagree with them, then this is the way they talk to you. Now, that's why at the start of this, I said, well, Jeremy, I'm going to let you be able to come on in here and see if you disagree with what the standards say. Now, I've already had this with Jeffrey Bauer, and of course, he hasn't replied back to me now since I've put it on there where he about the installation standards, and I put that on there where they know that. This here, where have I called anyone but you just did, Jeremy. You called the AHJ a moron.
Does he remember 2 seconds
Yeah,
ago?
he must be drinking again tonight, and he's drunk. Like, he uses that excuse quite a bit. But this just goes to prove what I'm talking about, the way they talk about it. And then they say, I've never said that about anybody. You just did. Everybody saw it. it sort of reminds me some of the things that they're doing
When
now.
did I ever call anybody a moron?
Yeah, I mean, it just it writes itself. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's take a look at it. All right, now this is product overview. Bill had this. I pulled this off of the myth of the week. He had this put there, and it literally says here. Wall connector includes integrated GFCI protection. They're already telling you it has it. It says do not install a GFCI circuit breaker. They're telling you no GFCI protection on it. Now, they're going to come in and tell you 210.8F applies. That's an outlet. First of all, it's not an outlet. I've been saying that for a long time, but we're not even going to get into that right now. What we're going to strictly base this on is the manufacturer instructions, the listing, labeling, identification of equipment. It overrides the NEC. Now, I find this interesting because my dad actually did a video on this, and I just didn't have time to go back and find everything. But he literally had a guy from UL that come on there. He was higher up. I forget his name. And he goes, why is this even an argument? And this is a guy from UL. He said, we follow the national codes and standards for the listing and labeling. He goes, and once we give that approval, he said, there's nothing in the code that overrides it because we've already taken it into consideration. This was a guy from UL that stated that. And I'm going to find that quote, and I'm going to pull it on here next week, and I'm going to show it. Hope you come on, Go Fan, and tell him he's a moron too. Okay.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to say too, James, is I actually just based on this, I actually asked one of the code making panel members, actually two of the code making panels from code making panel 2, if they considered this compatibility when they added 210.8F in, if they did any kind of investigation in it, and they said it was not part of their work. They said that that this is governed by Code Making Panel 12, and they stay out of it. So that would actually be 62554 in the audio that you have. So I just wanted to bring context into that so you guys know that when we get into that part.
And I'll take it a step further than that, just because it's in Chapter 6. But if you go and look, does chapters 5 through 8 override or modify the first 4 chapters of the code? Sure. Now you're going to tell me this doesn't apply. And that's what gets me when they say this kind of stuff. They go in and they just disregard other parts of the code, and we're showing all these things here to prove this point. But with that said, let's move forward. Now, this just is to pull out. They're telling you do not install a GFCI circuit breaker. And I'm going to prove here that what I'm saying, that it doesn't override it, because it's based on what is required out of the testing agencies in order to do this. Okay? Now, this right here, and I brought this up because this was from Jeffrey Bauer, and he quoted, I think it was 1454 or something like that, where he got in and he talked about the normative references that are in the UL document. And I want to read what it says. I'm going to read the first one first. It says, where reference is made to any standard, such reference shall be considered to refer to the latest additions and revisions thereto available at the time of printing unless otherwise specified. Now, let me just hit that, because he highlights 4.2, but he doesn't highlight 4.1. If they're making reference to a standard, and one of them, when they put a testing procedure together for whatever equipment they're going to do, which is going to be an ASTM standard. Okay.
Right.
Now, when they put that together right there, they consider which national electrical codes and everything through that testing standard in order to do that. Okay.
True.
So if they made reference to the national electrical code, then that takes care of it. And if you look at the National Electrical Code, what have I said that code is? I said it's a design and installation standard, right?
we actually have the audio of what Tommy D says live, so
Yeah,
that'll be coming up.
we'll be showing that here in a minute. Now, 4.2, he says products covered by this standard shall comply with the reference installation codes and standards noted in Annex A as appropriate for the country where the product is going to be used. Once again, they're telling you you're referencing here which standards you're going to use. So if you have an installation code like the National Electrical Code or the Canadian standards, then you're going to look at this right here, and they have to consider these codes to do this. This is not after the fact. Okay, so
Right.
that's what I want to point out here. It says when this product is intended for use in more than one country, the product. Now listen to what it says. The product shall comply with what? The installation codes and standards for all countries where it's intended to be used. So
Sure.
if that's the case, it tells me the product has already been tested through their testing procedures for it to be used. And I'm going to prove that because of what is required in 1910.7 in order to be considered a NERDL. Okay?
Sure.
Now,
Right.
let's, from there, I'm going to switch over right here and we're going to look at the National Electrical Code to start this off, and then I'm going to tie everything together. All right? Now, when you go and look at 110.3b and you deal with the installation use of equipment, what does it say? It says equipment that is listed, labeled, or both are identified for a use shall be installed. Hold on a second. I want to put this up right here. OSHA has nothing to do with this. Once again, this is Jeremy that doesn't understand the correlation of the codes and standards to go together. Let me explain this to you, Jeremy. OSHA, if the NEC didn't do certain things, OSHA would not recognize that standard. Okay, it wouldn't even be in their reference standards in the back of their annexes. Okay, the same thing goes with 70E. Let me ask you this: if OSHA comes out and there's something that happened and they go in and they take and cite something from, say, let's say it was electrical safety and they cited something in 70E, how would they be able to do that? Well, the reason they would be able to do that because they use it in the back of their standard as a remedial standard, and then they cite you on violations they have, but yet they use that standard in order to cite maybe you didn't wear the proper PPE. And why was that? Well, because you didn't go in and you didn't provide the available fault current, the clearing times, and all this to know what type of PPE you wear. They don't show you how to do all that. That's in 70E, but they'll use it as a remedial standard in order to cite you for not wearing the PPE that they require. Okay, and that is a good example. And in order for you to have a qualified testing laboratory or NERDL, they call it either one a QTL or NRTL, NERDL, a national recognized testing laboratory, in order for OSHA to recognize them as a federal standard, they tell you have to meet certain requirements. Okay, sure. And guess what? The NEC recognizes that. Okay, yeah. The NEC is not going to do something to disalienate or to alienate OSHA. Okay, I can tell you that. Sure. Matter of fact, when we started, this is experience talking here. When I was on the 70 committee, I've been on it pretty much since it started. And then when we started adding all this stuff and getting into this, guess what? We had Joseph Pipkin on there, who was in charge of OSHA. He was actually a member of it. And I specifically have heard him say, he's retired now, but he specifically has stated that the manufacturer's instructions, or the listing and labeling, override the National Electrical Code because they expect the manufacturer to take all those codes and standards into consideration. Okay? Sure. So, with that said, let's move forward a little bit. So, what is the installation in use here? Equipment that is listed, labeled, or both are identified for use shall be installed and used in accordance with any instructions included in the listing, labeling, or identification. Now, I'm going to stop right there. Here I have a listing and labeling, and it's telling me, and as y'all pointed out, well, they don't consider installation. Well, what does it say here? For use shall be installed and used in accordance with any instructions. It says installed and used.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
telling you here they've already considered this in order to have this listing, labeling, or identification. Okay? So
this goes hand in hand with one that I did a long time ago where we had a gentleman on YouTube that was installing equipment while energized, and I was like, I think that's a code violation. I remember we went and we covered it, and it is actually a code violation to install while energized because the manufacturer instructions tell you de-energize. Does the code tell you de-energize? No, they tell you to follow 110.3b, and 110.3b says step 1, de-energize the circuit.
yeah, and I want to take it a little step further here. When you're looking at this, this is for equipment that has a listing. This isn't something coming from overseas that's never had a listing and labeling or ever been looked at. Okay, and I'll tell you, as long as I've been doing this, if there's an inspector out there, if they see the listing and labeling on there and look at the instructions and see that UL marking, ETL, FM, whoever, and that they tell you not to do something, guess what? That's what they follow. I've never heard an instructor say, "Oh, I'm not following what the manufacturer says." Well, let me tell you, if you don't follow them and something happens, and you told the installer, and if I was an installer, he would sign something saying, I'm breaking what the listing and labeling says on here, then that inspector in that city will become responsible for that. True. And that's what I'm trying to say. You're trying to tell the manufacturer to do so and so. Well, are you going to take responsibility for that equipment now? The manufacturer is the one that's responsible for the equipment. Okay.
True, but, and that goes to the whole point with Tommy D's a member of Code Making Panel 2, and he's saying that it needs GFCI protection, but then NEHOD's sitting there saying that it meets the UL standard, saying that GFCI protection is already provided integral on the equipment per the standard. So I think they contradict each other, and especially if Tommy D comes back and says you need to apply 210.8F when they already said it's not even part of their jurisdiction, it's part of Code Making Panel 12. So, I mean, that's fine. If they want to talk out both sides of their mouth, I'm fine with that. But we'll show that audio at some point.
Yeah, we'll get there in a minute. So then when you look at it, and you look at 110.2, it says the conductors and equipment required or permitted by this code shall be acceptable only if approved. Well, now, if I'm the jurisdiction, and the equipment has a UL rating, and I look at that, I'm the authority having jurisdiction, so therefore I'm approving that equipment based off of that. And then I'll take it another step further here. Look at what they tell you in the informational note, C90.7, and it talks about examination of equipment for safety. I'm going to get to that at the end. And then it says also look at 110.3b that talks about the examination. So they're telling you here at the first, they examine that equipment and everything in order to get it by testing standards in order for it to be what? Listed and labeled. And then they tell you not only that, they tell you this is examination, identification, and one more time, installation. They're telling you it covers the installation and use of that equipment. And then it tells you to see these definitions where you get into approved, identified, listed, and labeled. And when you look at the definition of approved, it says it's acceptable to who? The authority having jurisdiction. But if you go to NFPA link, they have some enhanced content. Let's see what it says. It says typically, approval of listed equipment is more readily given by who? The authority having jurisdiction if the authority accepts a laboratory's listing mark.
Oh, now, dude, I thought the AHJ was a moron, huh, Jeremy?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm showing you right here exactly what NFPA is saying. So you're going to say the people that wrote this enhanced content at NFPA are morons too? I mean,
Yeah,
you can't have it both ways. But let's go a
true.
little further. It says other options may be available for their jurisdiction to approve equipment, including evaluation by the inspection authority or field evaluation by a qualified laboratory or individual. Now, how many times have you heard me talk about field evaluations on here and going
True.
through the typical process in order to do this? Now, look at what it says here. It says where an evaluation is conducted on site. They even have industry standards now that deal with this at NFPA. Just not
Yeah.
dealing with the testing procedures. They're telling you things to do here. So you have NFPA 79. You've heard me mention the electrical standard for industry machinery. And I was telling you a long time ago, we actually have a course where we go in and we teach how to go in and design equipment and stuff based
True.
on and believe it or not, we use the National Electrical Code, and we did this probably about a year and a half ago, where I went through and showed exactly things that you look for in the code for metal thickness, galvanic action of different metals. I was going spacing from your terminals and everything, how far the bus bars need to be off of the metal and everything. Okay, so
No,
yes,
we actually had this happen on one of the projects. We had industrial machinery that came from a different country, and a bunch of the wires were labeled wonky, and they didn't have a really good one line, and so they wanted to get it listed for the U.S. because it didn't have a North American listing. I want to say necessarily U.S. and Canada together, but it didn't have a North American listing, so they actually went and brought out a field evaluation body, and they went and they checked it out, and they had to like relabel some wires, and they had to relabel the one line, and then they went and put a UL sticker on it when it was all said and done, because
sure,
then anybody from the US can come and figure out how to wire that thing after they did all that.
sure. And and look at this. They got a standard here, NFPA 790. It's a standard for competency of third-party field evaluation bodies can be used to qualify evaluation services. Guess what?
Sure.
Next week. That is what I'm going to do for topic of the week. I wanted to say that because
Okay.
there's a lot I want to go through. But what you're going to see is a mirror that's going to take place with OSHA 1910.7. And what I'm looking forward to here is see, then come back on here and say the same thing, that this doesn't apply now. Are you going to tell me OSHA doesn't have anything to do it now? I'll show you 790 that sort of mirrors it. Does it not apply either? You
Sure.
can't pick and choose where you want to apply this. Now,
Sure.
NFPA 791, this gets into your where you're doing custom made equipment, and I was talking about a UL 508 and 508 shop I've talked about before many times on here. And this
Yeah.
is recommended practice and procedures for unlabeled electrical equipment evaluation can be used to evaluate unlabeled equipment in accordance, now look here, with nationally recognized standards and any requirements of the AHJ. Now, the reason I'm pointing that out right there is because when I get to that point right there, you are going to see where I talk about you have to consider national codes and standards.
Sure.
Okay. So they have to take all those into consideration before they give that listing and labeling. And if you're looking at the National Electrical Code, that's a design and installation code. So they're already considering the installation practices. Okay.
True, and there could be something where it's like a machine from like another country that's not compatible with Class A device. And guess what? The AHJ has the power to say, you know what? That's not something that I see as a big deal. Installing that here, hardwired in the U.S., like hardwired in Israel or hardwired in the U.S. as being any kind of change, and then they can make that consideration as not disregarding safety and complying with the NEC at the same time.
Sure. And if you look at the last paragraph, and you'll remember this because we did this about close to 2 years ago, I would assume. But
Probably.
it says, see also 110.2, 110.3 in the definitions of authority having jurisdiction for more information on approval process. Now, that's for equipment that's listed and labeled, but the next part of that sentence says the definitions of field evaluation body and field labeled for information on this option for product approval of AHJ. That's where we get into the custom made equipment. And they added those two definitions in the 2023 NEC, which ties in with what they were saying here with NFPA 791. Okay.
Nice.
Now,
well, and we really appreciate guys like Jeff Bowers coming in and providing information that they're misinterpreting, and that's awesome that we can come in and explain it better.
Sure. Now, with that said, I'm going to go through all this and I'm going to wrap it up with some of the definitions and stuff to show what we're saying here is correct.
Well, don't forget the audio you got.
Oh, yeah. Well, matter of fact, we'll start that audio right now and then I'll go into this. So let's listen to the audio here that you put in here.
Protection. So we had enough votes to create the first division and the second division, if I remember correctly, but then it wasn't 2/3 of the panel member votes to make the change. So I guess from the public it was killed, like it never made it through.
So, and Willie's saying, did the task group investigate EVSE? Now, the EVSE GFCI requirement is actually not a part of our work.
Oh, equipment, electric vehicles. But my understanding is the charging,
and then
any charger that's UL lifted would have personal protection. Like CCID 5 or CCID 20. So
right. And then Willie was saying, I think on that case that you were talking about, he says, did the circuit have an EGC? And I don't know the answer to that. I think there was a problem with the equipment grounding conductor.
I think if I remember correctly, that the details, I can share the details because it was, I happened to be an IEEE, just like a conference like this was in PCOH, another conference, walked into a room for a presentation. The author was talking, or presenter was talking about something completely different, had nothing to do with GFCIs, but he is a forensic engineer in Chicago, and he happened to be the individual who went and investigated this case. And he mentioned that we were between the first draft and second draft during the public comment stage. And I went to talk to him after his presentation and said, hey, I think his name was Tom too. Can I, would you be okay? Like I introduced myself, and I think we should work on fixing this problem so that we don't need to lose another life. This was sad. This boy should have been 20 some years, almost 30 years now, had he made it, right? I think he was 10 or 7 years old when he lost his life. So I asked the presenter if he would be willing to share the details with me, because he was just talking like in generic. And he was nice enough to of course got the permission from the lawyers and from the family of that kid, and he told me that they were waiting, and the message was, which is really powerful, that they want this to change so that this saves lives and that no one else would have to go through what they have gone through because of losing their child. And I told him when this happened, the code was updated, and he told me that they were happy that that there was something good came out of this tragedy. So he shared with me the pictures and the whole story. I believe it was some problem with the unit, and then the maintenance guy came and they miswired the unit, and there were some issues with the unit, and then it failed. So that that's like a perfect storm kind of condition.
Yeah.
Like and this would get us to the argument. What if the person, a competent person, and
here's the thing. So
okay.
Dude, I don't know what's up, but that 12 string sounds amazing, dude, for backing.
I wonder who put that in there.
I don't know. Might have slipped it in. I should have probably made it a little quieter so you could hear that they said that that's not part of their work, that is the work of code making panel 12. That was they actually refer you to 62554, and they don't refer you to 210.8F as a lot of people would like you to think. And just stuff like that. Then the whole thing, they give you the whole backstory with the 210.8F, how it got put in the code, and how it was a maintenance guy who miswired the unit, and then the kid jumped on it, lost the equipment ground, all that stuff. And a lot of that stuff I think is a little suspect as far as code change, but
well, I'll make
analysis.
a statement on that. I was listening to it, and one of the things Thompson Ramirez is saying, somebody asked a question, was an EGC installed, and he goes, well, I'm not sure if it was or not. You're on code making panel 2, and you're supposed to worry about technical merit of something that needs to be justified, and you didn't know that there wasn't an equipment ground pulled in, and that's what really caused the death of that individual, and then you try to push GFCI protection on it, and when it became a wiring issue, and you didn't know that, give me a break. I'm not following that. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
If I was on code making panel 2, I would know that.
And the thing was that we actually posted this exact clip from YouTube, and Tommy D was like, oh, no, 210.8F still applies. It's like, okay, that's fine, but you can't have it both ways, just like me and James are saying. You can't just pick and choose, like, oh, well, generically all EBSE applies to 210.8F, but, it's our opinion that this one has a Class A protection, or it's not. The reason that there's a problem with this is because the EBSE is not compatible with Class A devices. So when they provide personnel protection, it's 20 milliamps. Well, 20 milliamps is not considered Class A protection. That's why there's an issue here.
Correct.
And they want to argue that.
Now, based on that, if you look right here, it talks about the application, and it says this section shall apply only when the term, your NERDL, National Recognized Testing Laboratory, is used in other sections of this part. Okay, we're going to get in, we're going to show all of this. Now, if you look at the laboratory requirements for NERDL, what does it say? It means it's an organization which is recognized by OSHA in accordance with Appendix A of this section, and which tests for safety. And how many times we heard, well, you don't care about safety. Well, no, I do care about safety, and so does these laboratories that are doing this testing. This is one of their requirements, is to test for safety. And then it says, and lists or labels or accepts equipment or materials in which meets all the following criteria. Well, let's look and see what criteria in B here you're required to meet. In B1, it says for each specified item of equipment or material to be listed, labeled, or accepted, the NERDL has the capability, now look at what it's telling you, you got to know here, including proper testing equipment and facilities, trained staff, you have to have written testing procedures, and calibration and quality control programs to perform. And then it tells you, in order to do that, you have to have testing and examining of equipment and materials. Now look at here, for workplace safety. I mean, you can't be more clear than that. They're telling you this, when they do all this testing and everything, give a listing and labeling, they're taking workplace safety into consideration to determine the conformance with appropriate test standards.
All right, I'm gonna raise my hand, ask the stupid question that everyone's asking right now.
Okay.
How does this pertain to residential and a dwelling unit?
Well, think of it this way. I'll just use something simple. Say I take and I plug in a toaster. Okay, it's got a little label on there. It's UL listed and everything. Is that toaster there in design to plug in there the correct way in order to provide safety? Sure. Let's say that I have an AC unit outside. I've got an AC unit out there, has a UL listing and labeling on it. Has it been designed to provide safety?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. This argument.
Does it matter if it's at a dwelling unit or at a commercial site or?
No. You're going to tell me I can have this one certain AC unit on residential, and it's the same one I use it on commercial. It performs a different application.
But it's not designed for a workplace.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to tell you. You know, the equipment is designed with safety in mind, but I'm going to get it further detail into that in a little bit, and I'm going to show you that, you know, utilization equipment, whether I'm plugging something in or I'm hardwired, it has been designed in order to provide safety, period. Okay, that is one of the things they take into consideration. And look at me too, because it says experimental testing and examining of equipment and materials for workplace safety purposes to determine conformance with appropriate test standards or performance in a specified manner. Now, let me ask you this. Let's say I have an AC unit residential there. Okay, do the 70E document pertain to that guy right there as the same as it would if somebody was working on it in commercial?
Oh yeah, because that's his workplace that's working on it.
That's right. Workplace safety. You know, when you go look at the 70E, we just don't say this only applies to commercial and industrial. We never say that. Why is that? Because workplace safety applies anywhere you're going to be doing any type of electrical work. You need to do it in a safe manner. That's the same with equipment. Equipment has to be designed for whoever's going to go out there and work on it.
So
Okay?
let me back you up just a few steps here and try to kind of get some background here on this 1910. What is the reason for this 1910? Was it just for workplace safety, or was it to make a standard that complies to all electrical installations? Like, what is the whole? I'm just trying to figure out what is the whole reason for this 1910. What was it put into place just strictly for workplace safety, or was it put into place for appliance safety in for all applications?
It was put in place for the national recognized testing laboratories and what the
Okay,
requirements are out of them in order to give a listing and labeling to a piece of equipment. Or
gotcha.
it's for the equipment. And what they're telling you here is they're doing the testing and everything for the equipment and materials for workplace safety purposes.
Okay,
It's not, this here has nothing to do with workplace safety that you're actually going out to work. They're telling you the equipment is designed that way for workplace safety.
gotcha.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I was
Now,
just trying to kind of back you up a little so everyone understands, kind of in layman's terms, that this isn't like just going after workplace safety. This is a standard for overall compliance with electrical safety.
sure. And watch what it says here. What when you get and look at 1910.7b2, it tells you here the NERDL shall provide to the extent needed for the particular equipment or materials listed, labeled, or accepted. You have to follow the following controls or services. This is what's required of the testing laboratory. It says you are required to implement control procedures for identifying the listed and labeled equipment or materials. Your inspects the run of production of such items at factories for product evaluation purposes to assure conformance. Now, listen to what it says. To assure conformance with what? Test standards. Okay, that's your
Right.
ASTM standards for the equipment. That's why you got all these UL standards out there. Okay, these are your test standards for that. Then it says conduct field inspections to monitor and assure the proper use of its identifying marker labels on products. And in other words, what I'm trying to say is, the argument's been on the AC unit, and they had to go in and put an exception there. And I said that exception shouldn't even be there. And I've got crucified left and right. Well, the reason I say that is because the manufacturer has already had to go through the listing and labeling for that piece of equipment. And the way that equipment is sitting out there, there was nothing in the product standards for listing labeling that said it needed GFCI protection. Code making panel 2 just said, you know what? We need to take and have listing and labeling on I mean, we need to have GFCI protection, but yet they never submitted anything that showed that there was an urgent need because it was killing people. The deaths that they come in and they used in order to need that GFCI protection. One of them was a kid that got killed, which was sad, but that had to do with a wiring. It had nothing to do with the AC unit. And the other 2 or 3 that they had on there when this started was technicians out there working on something and not doing it in a safe work environment and not applying 70E. That's what it was based on. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is, in my opinion, I don't think they have the technical merit to do it. And in order for me to prove that point, is they actually put a task group together that went out and did all this testing and everything. And the report was submitted in a TIA, and they had enough members on Code Making Panel 2 that they completely rejected that TIA and wrote their own TIA. Now, when that happened, you know, Jeremy and all them, they started posting out going, see, you don't know what you're talking about. You're stupid. You're a moron. Call me all kinds of names. And Bill will verify this happened. I said it isn't going to stay. You know, that was the time when Ryan Jackson probably got up on the General Assembly floor and did his mic drop, they said, and they were all oohing and ahhing. And I said, no matter what he says, I said, when it gets to the Standards Council, I said, they don't have the technical merit to do what they did. And I said, the Standards Council is going to overturn that, and they're going to use the original TIA. Well, what happened? Exactly what I said would happen. So this is...
Dude, I was blown away. Honestly, I was blown away because you were like, this is what's going to happen. It's not going to be compatible. There's no way they're going to do it. And what I didn't know exactly, but I think, and I could be wrong, I think what was happening was Code Making Panel 2 didn't want an exception added to 210.8F. Mm-hmm. And they were trying to get away from an exception, and then the Standards Council said, nope, there's going to be an exception for 2023.
That's right.
And the thing that blew me away is that there's still a TIA out there.
That's right. And
it still hasn't been resolved.
Well, the interesting part about it is, in the 2026 Code Making Panel 2 resubmitted the same TIA that got rejected by the Standards Council. That tells me something's not right here. If you got rejected for another one, you need to disregard that thing. But I'm not going to go too much more than that. I want to prove my point here.
We can't get into all the places where I was right because mine got rejected, and I proved that an outlet does not have to exist on an individual branch circuit. So
sure, where'd Jeremy go anyway? He's not
I don't know,
disagreeing with anything. But
yeah, I don't know. He was getting a little mad. Like, I think he was like stroking out. He said, Bill, like a whole bunch of times. So I was like, man, he must be stroking out in the chat over there, you know. And then he's saying, oh man, OSHA has nothing to do with this. And I was like, oh, all right.
Yeah, they do. And that's why and that's why I try to tell people that watch the podcast.
Post all the comments. So I just posted them all, and like, you're not here. So
well, most of them he's cussing in them. But when you get in, and I tell people this, just look at what we're showing you here. You know, this is federal here. So this is not like something we're just making up here. We're showing you the words. We're not giving you opinions here. We're showing you what it says and what it means. So when I look at B3, look what it says. The NERDL is completely independent. It's completely independent when they give us listing and labeling of employers subject to the tested equipment requirements and of any manufacturer or vendors of equipment materials being tested for these purposes. So they're completely independent when they do this. And then they tell you the NERDL maintains effective procedures for what? Producing credible findings or reports that are objective and without bias, and handling complaints and disputes under a fair and reasonable system. Okay, now I'm going to show you why that is. That is the main thing. Why is that? Well, when I get in here, to me, this is the meat of everything. And you'll see why I laid this out the way I did, because I want you to see exactly what it says. Get to this first, then this is the meat of everything right here. Okay? Mm-hmm. So you've heard me specifically state test standards, right?
Yeah.
I've been over and over that. And it says the appropriate test standard refer into where B1I2, which is what we just looked at over there, is a document which specifies the safety requirements for specific equipment or class of equipment, and it is recognized in the United States as a safety standard providing an adequate level of safety. Now, I just want to stop right there for anybody listening to this. They're telling you that they've created a test standard here that when they do this testing, that it's providing an adequate level of safety for anybody that's going to be working on that in the workplace. Is that correct?
True.
Okay.
100%.
Then look what it says. Now, anybody that argues with this, and that's why next week I'm going to do my topic on NFPA 7.9. It's going to be quite a bit of stuff we're going to go over. But
okay,
when I look at C2, look what it says. Compatible with and maintain current with periodic revisions of applicable national codes and installation standards. Now look at that. If it is considered, and I've stated this over and over, I said, if you look at the National Electrical Code, nobody ever argues this. I said, it's a design and installation code. Okay?
True. It's a standard, not a manual. A lot of people get that wrong.
Yeah.
Looks like we got Team SOS up in here. What's up, Adam?
How's it going, brothers?
Here in a little while, brother. Let me keep going what I'm going.
Okay,
Get me back to full screen.
He's just gonna finish up.
Sounds good.
Now, as you look at that, there's your national codes and installation standards. Okay. Now, I've already had, Jeffrey Bauer. He is arguing with me left and right, telling me I was a twit and all this other stuff. And I said, it says right here, Jeremy, national codes and installation standards have to be considered when they're designing this equipment. And he just started calling me all kinds of names and everything. But listen to what else it says here. And I brought this up to you or not when we were talking about it. It says, developed by standards developing organization under a method providing for input and consideration of views of industry groups, experts, users, consumers, governmental authorities, and others having broad experience in the safety field involved. Now, what does that sound like? It sounds like the code making panels for the National Electrical Code. They have manufacturers and everybody in their industry groups. You've got people that belong to the inspectors, that belong to contractors. It just goes on and on, all different ones that are in there because they're developing a standard. So this is not, when they put a test standard together, it's just not by somebody that has an interest just in that piece of equipment. You see what I'm saying? They use everybody in order to do this. And then it says, in lieu of those first three paragraphs we just read, the standard is currently designated as what? An ANSI standard or ASTM standard.
Yeah, that's it. ANSTM.
Yeah, for evaluations of your products and materials. So if
ANSI.
if I look at C2 there, it's telling me that all of these people are looking at any applicable national codes or installation standards. And so if Tesla brings their equipment in, you've got all these people looking at it and they tell you don't put GFCI protection on it. Guess what? They've already considered the National Electrical Code.
True. Yeah,
okay?
100%.
And what I would say is if you disagree with what I'm reading here, I'm not going to say put it in the comments. Tell me where I'm wrong with this. Okay?
Got you.
Now, as I go through that a little bit more, it talks about you could have an alternative test standard. It says, if a testing laboratory desires to use a test standard other than the one allowed under paragraph C we just looked at, then the Assistant Secretary of Labor shall evaluate the proposed standard, determine that it provides an adequate level of safety before its use. Oh,
True.
I thought OSHA didn't have nothing to do with equipment.
True.
You know?
Yeah.
And then look at this. A testing organization desiring recognition by OSHA as a NERDL shall request that OSHA evaluate its testing and control programs against the requirements in this section for any equipment or material it may specify. The recognition procedure shall be conducted in accordance with Appendix A to this section. Well, guess what Appendix A looks at? It looks at your different national code standards and everything else in order to do this.
True.
So,
Look who we got in here now. We got the Gypsy over there, Texas Connection in the house.
hey, Gypsy.
Yay.
Awesome.
How's it going, guys?
Hey,
Yeah, dude. That's so awesome.
give me
That's so
about
awesome, brother.
give me about 5-10 more minutes, and I'll be wrapping this up, guys.
Okay.
All right. Now, with all that said, then we go back and we look at the National Electrical Code. What does it say? Well, here's your definitions. What is the definition of identified? It says, recognizes suitable for the specific purpose, function, use, environment, application, and so forth, were described in particular code requirements. Now, that goes back to what I talked about identified, and I was showing a while back how to take equipment, and you would use a National Electrical Code, certain sections to design that equipment that you would see the testing procedure recognized that was pulled out of the code. Then it says, some examples of ways to determine suitability of equipment for a specific purpose, environment, application. Look at here. Include investigations by what? A qualified testing laboratory, which is a NERDL, for listing and labeling, an inspection agency, or any organization concerned with product evaluation. Now,
yeah, and you were right about that whole thing about it coming down to Code Making Panel 1, too. Because a lot of these references are Code Making Panel 1.
That's right. Now watch this. It talks about labeling. Look, this is where you attach a label, similar identifying mark. I'm not going to get into all of that. But it also says at the very last that in whose labeling the manufacturer indicates compliance with appropriate standards or performance in a specified manner. It didn't say in compliance with the National Electrical Code. It said appropriate standards. So they're telling you that they're taking the National Electrical Code or any other standards to take care of this. And then it says in the informational note, it says, if a listed product is such a size, shape, material, surface texture that is not possible to legibly mark complete label, then the complete label may appear in the smallest unit container, which is packaged. So they're telling you, you look at this label, and if the label's there, then you have a piece of equipment that's listed and labeled. Okay? And then
what are you complying with? You're complying with the language that was given by Code Making Panel 1 in the National Electric Code.
Exactly. And look at this. It says equipment and conductors required or permitted by the NEC are acceptable only if they've been approved for a specific environment or application by the AHJ as stated in 110.2. Listing or labeling by a qualified testing laboratory provides a basis for approval. Now, look at this. Equipment and conductors required or permitted by the NEC are acceptable. Well, if I have a listing and labeling on here, they're telling you right here in their own enhanced content that it's what? Acceptable.
Yeah.
I mean,
and I'm glad that Gopher fan agrees.
Yeah. Then it says, see also 90.7 regarding the examination of equipment for safety. We're going to get to that here in just a second. Then you get to your listed equipment here. Okay, the same thing happens here. it says meets appropriate designated standards or has been tested and found suitable for a specified purpose. If they're telling you, like the Tesla charger we just looked at, their product evaluation standard there, or document they have there, it tells you that it's suitable for what they're telling you for that specified purpose. It's already been tested and found that way. Okay? Then it says, listen to this, the means for identifying the listed equipment may vary for each organization concerned with product evaluation, some of which do not recognize equipment as listed unless it is also labeled. Okay? Use of this system employed by the listing organization allows the authority having jurisdiction to identify a listed product. Okay? So just as you're following along with this, what does it say I need to do for examination of equipment? And this is where we're going to wrap up. And there's going to be another one we're going to talk about here in a minute too. It says, okay, for specific items of equipment and materials referred to in this code, examination for safety made under standard conditions provide a basis for approval where the record is made generally available through the promulgation by organizations properly equipped and qualified for what? Experimental testing, inspection of the runs of goods at factories, and service value determination through field inspection. This avoids the necessity for repetition of examinations by different examiners frequently with inadequate facilities for such work and the confusion that result from conflicting reports on suitability of devices and materials examined for a given purpose. Now,
nice.
That right there is telling you that you have standard conditions providing a basis for what? Approval.
Safety.
Well, for approval is what they're getting to here.
Well, yeah, approval of safety, based on safety.
Now, when you look at that, then it says it is the intent. It literally is the intent. We're going to get into this of this code that factory installed internal wiring or the construction equipment need not be inspected at the time of the installation of the equipment except to detect alterations or damage. If the equipment has been listed by a qualified testing laboratory that is recognized as having the facilities described in the preceding paragraph and that requires suitability for installations in accordance with this code, suitability shall be determined by applications of requirements that are compatible with this code. And then you look at the notes, and where do they take you once again? 110.3, and then we get back to Article 100, and it tells you to see the definitions for listed and reconditioned. And then you got your Annex A of the list of product safety standards. And guess what standards are back there? Oh my God, UL is back there in Annex A? How can that be? So... Now that right there, you're an idiot. Now that goes to show you, but I want to look at this last part. The enhanced content, what do they say for 90.7 in the examination of that equipment? And it says testing laboratories, inspection agencies, and other organizations concerned with product evaluation publish lists of equipment materials that have been tested and meet nationally recognized standards or that have been found to be suitable for what? In use in a specified manner. Then it says the NEC does not contain detailed information on equipment or materials, but refers to products as listed, labeled, or identified. Oh, you got to be kidding me. You mean the NEC, the people who write the code book, they're telling you right here, the NEC does not contain detailed information on equipment or materials, but refers to the products as listed, labeled, or identified. So if they're referring to you that, and you've got a product that's listed and labeled, and they tell you don't put GFCI protection on it, the NEC's referring to it.
True. I mean, and everyone who said false this week, everyone who said false was correct.
Yeah, I mean, it literally
King
says
James
it right here.
Right there.
Then it says, see Article 100 for definitions. Then, and I went through all the definitions to tie it all in so you could see what I was talking about. And then look what it says. Many certification agencies also perform field evaluations of specific installations in order to render an opinion on compliance with NEC requirements along with any applicable product standard. You've got to be kidding me. You mean that if I take and I'm doing a custom made equipment and I look at NFPA 791 and I'm using OSHA 10.7, the requirements for the testing authority that's going to be going out there, a NERDL or qualified testing laboratory, what do you want to call it? They're telling you here that they're literally going to render an opinion on compliance with NEC requirements along with any applicable product standards. You got to be kidding. And then look what they reference you to one more time. NFPA 790, NFPA 791. How about that? Now, let's look at the second paragraph. Let's see what they say. NFPA does not approve, inspect, or certify any installations, procedures, equipment, or materials, nor does it approve or evaluate testing laboratories. Oh, well, if you don't do that, who does it? Oh, that's right, Jeremy. It's OSHA. That's why they have to deal with this. Are you picking up and learning it yet, Jeremy? Instead of just calling me names, listen to what I'm saying.
Oh, dude, nobody's getting pissed at anybody, Jeremy. Like we're just laughing at you.
I'm just trying to tell you. I'm reading what it says, and you're not disputing anything I say. Instead, you're just saying, "Oh, you are pissed off." I'm not pissed. I never get pissed.
Yeah, right? We just show what it says.
Now listen to this. I love this part. In determining the acceptability of, looky here, installations. There's installations again. I've been stating this. Installations are procedures, equipment, or materials that AHJ may base acceptance on compliance with NFPA or other appropriate standards. Okay? The AHJ may also refer to the listing or labeling practices of an organization concerned with what? Product evaluation to help determine compliance with what? Appropriate standards. So here, NFPA doesn't do any of this. They're telling you it's the AHJ, and if you have somebody that say UL that's coming in, they're doing product evaluations, they have to concern themselves with the installations and everything that goes with it as part of compliance with the testing standards with all the different appropriate standards. The AHJ can accept that. That's what they're telling you here. And then what does it say here? Informative Annex A contains a list of product safety standards used for product listing. Oh, you got to be kidding me. It says the list includes product safety standards for which a listing is required by the NEC. Oh, wait, the NEC is requiring this for a listing? I just can't believe this is what I'm reading. For example, 344.6 requires that rigid metal conduit, RMC, be listed. By using Informative Annex A, the user finds that the listing standard for rigid metal conduit is UL6. Oh, you mean they actually have a standard there, that they have a testing standard in order to test all of these different pieces of equipment in order to give it a listing and labeling? That's what I'm trying to say. The NEC recognizes this as what they're going to use in order to list and label that equipment, and part of that listing and labeling includes the installation, which it specifically states right there.
I'm telling you right now, the Willie Jackerson steel conduit factory is going to be really pissed off right now because they haven't had to get a listing yet. But